Well, good morning. It is again a privilege to be with you in your homes this morning. I know that some of the moms last week I heard jokingly talk about just you're inside all the time, you're with the kids all the time, you're constantly around food. One of our moms called it the quarantine 15, meaning we're gaining about 15 pounds during this time. I was talking with Dawn Feely, and she just called it the COVID-19, meaning we're destined to gain about 19 pounds during this time. Hey, just a shout out to the medical professionals in our community. What you do in an ordinary situation is heroic. And thank you for your preparedness. Already in our community, there's a number of people who've come down with COVID-19, and thank you. We are lucky to have you in our community serving us the way you do, so selflessly. And so just a shout out to you. And again, for those of you who have contributed financially, for those of you who will contribute financially, we're trying to put on our website front and center. You'll see on the message we're going to put out front and center, how do you give? Make it as easy as possible. But thank you for your sacrifice. I think during a time like this, giving, however it is, whether it's with your time, your talents, your treasure, your money, your resources, giving, what it does is it rids ourselves of us. And it causes us to think more highly of others than we do of ourselves. And we need that during this time. Easter plans. We are not going to be meeting together on Easter. We're going to, again, be coming to you through our technology once again. Our country has said, hey, you know what? We need to continue social distancing, and we want to obey that. And so we have Easter plans. I'm going to talk about that more on the end of my message, but we're going to have a Good Friday service that'll be up and running sometime in the morning. You can utilize it anytime you want during the course of the day. It'll be more extensive than our normal sniblet. We'll have music coordinated with message for all of us on Good Friday. But then also next Sunday, we will have our Easter service coming to you just like we do today. We are not going to stop celebrating the greatest event in human history just because we're in lockdown. You know, what occurs to me, I printed off this. This was C.S. Lewis, made a mark in history. And there was a fellow by the name of James Welch. He was the BBC director of religious broadcasting, responsible for getting C.S. Lewis on the air during World War II. During a calamity where you had similar parallels. And this is what he writes. He said, in a time of uncertainty and questioning, during our time right now, it is a time of uncertainty and questioning. But he writes, in a time of uncertainty and questioning, it is the responsibility of the church to declare the truth about God and his relation to man. We need God's perspective now more than ever. I know that you have been exposed to some statistics. I want to share some things to give you some perspective in the midst of this. And the statistics I come to you with are from the sources www.worldometers, OMETERS.info. I don't know exactly how accurate these statistics are. I don't know how accurate any statistics are. But worldwide deaths from January 1st to now, to this present time, are approximately, with coronavirus, have climbed up over 50,000. And this is worldwide statistics. And the good thing about this is you can stop this at any time if you want to hear the statistics over again. But the death toll worldwide from coronavirus has climbed up over 50,000. It's estimated that well over 1 million people have come down with the disease. But let me give you some perspective, because during the same period of time, 113,000 people have died by seasonal flu. During the same period of time, 228,000 people have died due to malaria. Now, these are worldwide statistics. During the same period of time, 249,000 people have died due to suicide. 313,000 deaths by traffic violations worldwide. Worldwide, 390,000 plus people have died because of AIDS. Worldwide, some 581,000 people have died due to alcohol. 1,162,000 deaths worldwide due to smoking. 1,909,000 deaths by cancer. 2,382,000 deaths by hunger, and a staggering close to 10 million deaths by abortion during the same period of time. Now, please understand me. I want you to hear this really well, and you're going to have this on a recording so that you can go back over this. I want to wordsmith what I'm saying to you very carefully. This does not minimize where we are with corona. It is a virus that is aggressive, and the numbers are continuing to climb. We need to do what we're doing. We need to take all the precautions necessary to stop it, to minimize the number of people who are going to suffer by it. But yet all of these other deaths, why haven't we heard anything about them? Well, because they're not new news. These are the same numbers this year that happened last year, and the same numbers this year that happened 3 years ago. Death is all around us, and it always has been. We, in our culture, we minimize death. We kind of sequester it away. And what the coronavirus has done is it has brought death front and center because it's new news, and it's causing us to go, wow, something needs to be done about this, and it does need to be done about this. But it's caused us to wrestle with death normally where we've kind of sequestered it aside because all these numbers that I've shown you have always been with us. And what an opportune time for us to be able to proclaim the resurrection of Jesus Christ during this period of time. Because death has always been around us, and now because of the coronavirus, it's brought us front and center. It's brought it to the forefront of our minds, but now folks are ready to hear a message that Jesus conquered death, the resurrection, the greatest event in human history. Because now death no longer has a sting. God has given us a way out. Nobody else has provided a way out of a death. And God has given us eternal life through his Son in a relationship with Jesus, because Jesus died on the cross to pay the penalty for our sins. So this is a great opportunity in the midst of this tragedy. So I think there are times in life where instruction that we receive needs to intersect with what our current felt needs are. I believe this is one of those times. We find ourselves today being thrust into familial interaction at a level we possibly have never experienced before. That's why during this time that we're quarantined together, our communication is driven by the thought, and we've said this over the past few weeks, but our communicating to you is driven by this thought. What does it look like if Jesus truly influences our behavior on the inside of our lives, in our homes, in our thoughts, in the integrity of our heart? What if we submitted our attitudes, our priorities, and our most intimate interactions to Jesus? What we want to do is we want to be intentional about shoring up our most intimate relationships. And what an opportune time. What an opportunity that we have to generate God-centered conversation, that God can transform our thinking from the inside. Romans chapter 12, verse 2, and again, we've put the notes on our website. But in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it says this. It says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. During normal times in our lives, in the hustle of our life, it's very easy to be conformed. We can conform ourselves. The word conform is the word, it's schema. It means blueprint. In other words, we can make the blueprint of our life look like the world's blueprint in how we live and how we love and how we work and what we value. In our own strength, we can conform ourselves to that which we spend the most amount of time with. The word transform, though, is a God word. We can't transform ourselves. So Paul, in his instructions in Romans chapter 12, he says, don't be conformed. Don't let your blueprint look like the blueprint of the world. Don't let your values look like the values of the world. In other words, he says, transform your mind. We can't do that on our own. The word comes from metamorphosis. We can't transform our minds any more than that worm in the cocoon can transform itself, can morph itself into this beautiful butterfly. It's a God transformation. God has to do the work. And so what we're saying is transform, metamorphosis, morph our hearts into what God you desire, into your thoughts, into your attitudes. You know, normally it's not possible to quarantine ourselves from the world, nor should we, because God has called us to be influential in the world. But during this window of time, it's a unique opportunity. It's a time that God is providing for us to be sequestered away from all of the hustle so that we can be in an environment more conducive to be transformed, to experience transformation. There's an old saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Never before have we had the opportunity to be this together. You're sitting there in your homes with each other. You have been together more now than probably you have, maybe in your entire lives. And if we spend our time wisely, this time will enable us, like no other time, to go far. Let me ask you a question. What are some of the dreams you have for your family? What are some of the dreams you have for your family? Now, this doesn't exclude singles. You are part of family as well. Your family might not be biological, it might be, but many of you live in community with other singles. And so what are the dreams that you have for your family? It might be good to maybe push the pause button and go and brainstorm. What are the dreams you have for your family? Probably some of the dreams that you would come up with if you started listing them were fun, shared experiences, values passed on from one generation to another, created memories, traditions. See, we long to move through life as a team where we can overcome struggles together. We can bring out the best in one another. We long, we dream for where we are better together than we are separate. We dream for being fully known and unconditionally accepted, where trust is treasured, where there's an unbroken bond, where forgiveness is freely given and trust is built and love is sacrificial. See, all of us really at our core have that dream. But we're broken, and we live in a broken world. And at times, hopelessness sneaks in. Silence becomes the conversation. Many times we're too busy to connect. We walk on eggshells. We feel invisible maybe sometimes. Conflict goes unresolved. We're individuals under the same roof, moving through life, but we're not moving through life together. That's the nightmare. We long for the dream, but many times we experience the nightmare. And the question becomes, what causes us to drift from dream to nightmare? All of us have expectations about our family. And many times those expectations don't match each other, but all of us have expectations. But then reality kicks in. And that gap between expectation and reality, that's what's called disappointment. Part of the reality that we deal with is our own fault. See, unknowingly, we place ourselves in the center of our expectations. All of us do this. We have expectations, and we look at our expectations coming from our paradigm. We live out of an I rather than a we. We know that we ought to stick together through thick or thin. We know that it's that for better or for worse together, right? But what happens is we underestimate the worse. The job loss, the depression, blended family challenges, conflict, exhaustion, unexpected death, disability, money issues, sickness, and now you find yourselves in coronavirus situation. This is the worst. If the single greatest act in history, the gospel, the death, burial, and resurrection were not true, if the single greatest act in history, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ were not true, all of life would culminate in a cataclysmic, disappointing train wreck. It would. If the resurrection isn't true, if Jesus didn't conquer death, then all of life is just this cataclysmic crash. But the gospel is true. And that means what is available to our family, what's available to us is hope. Hope of new beginnings. When our dreams for our families are challenged, we can make one of three decisions. First is we can give up on our dreams, and many people do. And then we just kind of live day to day, furthering ourselves in isolation, living with cynicism. And quite frankly, that's the way the majority of people live. They just survive. Give up on your dreams. Or what we can do is we can find a new dream, which will last a while, because if it's just driven by your humanity, well, that dream will soon become stale as well. Or we have a third option. We can grab hold of God's dream. God's dream is a bigger vision for you and your family than you have ever imagined. It is an eternal dream. What I want to argue this morning to realize the dream that God has for you, for your family, it starts with communication. See, God made each of us as His image bearers. Some of you are image bearers in your femaleness. Some of you are image bearers in your maleness. And we are to show off what God is like to the world. And part of the image of God that He shares with us is that God is a God of communication. As His image bearers, God created us as communicative beings. No other created organisms have the ability to communicate like we do. Some of you are thinking, well, my dog can talk. Well, he can make some noises that let you know he needs some more water, or he makes some noises, some barks to let you know he needs to go out. But he can't talk like you can. See, you were created, no other organism was created in the image of God. And so as such, you have the ability to form thoughts and then to take those thoughts and transfer them to someone. Think about this. I mean, this is crazy. All I'm doing is making sequential gurgling noises, and I'm piecing those different noises together. We call them words. And you hear those words on your brain, and your brain instantly knows what I am talking about. Communication is one of the greatest gifts God has given us. And we can use it to tear someone to shreds, or we can use our words to usher people into the presence of a holy God. With that in mind, communication carries with it a responsibility to steward our words well. We have a choice in how we choose to use this unbelievable, potent gift of communication. A few months ago, Julie and I were listening to a gentleman by the name of James Cofield. He was discussing the whole art of communication, and he said this. He said, intimate communication cannot happen if vulnerability is absent. Intimate communication cannot happen if vulnerability is absent. See, as a believer in Jesus Christ, the goal of communication is to build unity, and that can only be done by sharing out of who we are. Sharing who we are is what we call transparency. Experts agree that there are 5 levels of communication that we drift in and out of. I've got those on the notes. And it starts with a great number of people that we communicate at this level, and then as we go further down the chart of communication levels, the number gets smaller and smaller. Level 1 in our communication is what we want to call cliche communication. It's really non-communication. It's elevator conversation. You're not connecting, you're not being vulnerable, you're just acknowledging someone's presence. It's cliche. Level 2, as we move down the chart, is what we want to call the fact level, where you're sharing what you know. I have a red car. You're not risking anything, it's very safe, you're just staying at the fact level. Level 3 is the opinion level. It's sharing what you think. My wife would say, my opinion is if I have 12 hours on a Saturday, a good way to spend those 12 hours is to nestle down with a good book on the sofa. My opinion would be if I have 12 hours on a Saturday is to watch 12 hours of college football. See, we both have different opinions. It's a little bit more risky when you share your opinion. Level 4 is our emotion. It's sharing what we feel. I feel kind of a little bit self-conscious that I'm speaking in an auditorium that's totally empty. I feel. It's a little risky to share your emotions, isn't it? It's sharing what you feel. And level 5 is transparency. It's sharing who you are. Your passions, your dreams, your needs, your wants, your desires. My passion, I'm a person that's passionate when it comes to communicating what Christ has done for us. That's sharing who I am. Now, when you think about it, at level 1, there's a lot of people you can come in contact with at the cliche level. You come in contact with the masses at this level. But as you move down the chart, the number lessens and lessens until you get to the transparent level, and what we would argue is that ought to be reserved for your family, for those that you love and treasure the most, where you're able to share who you are, where real, genuine communication is occurring. And here's the problem. Here's the problem. When we've been hurt, what happens is we stop going below the fact level. Because truth is, if we share our opinion, our emotion, our transparency, we fear being shot down. And so if we've been hurt in a relationship in the context of the family, well, you know what? I'm just going to stick with the facts. Yes, it is a nice day out. No, it's not a nice day. It's rainy and cold. We won't meander beyond that because, no, I've stuck my neck out before with my opinions and my aspirations and my fears, and man, those are shot down. So no, I'm just going to stick with the facts. Yes. And it's a sad day in our family when the conversation just stops at the fact level. See, when we feel safe to share our opinion, our emotion, who we are, we have a better chance to experience unity. You know, you have to ask the question when you come to communication, why is communication so difficult? Well, remember, we have this ability, we can use communication to tear somebody to pieces or to usher them into the presence of a holy God. Listen to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. It says this, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Why is communication so difficult? Because we can go one of two ways. Death, we can crush somebody with our words. Or life, we can empower somebody with our tongue. Listen to what James says in chapter 3, verses 5 through 8. He says, the tongue is a small part of the body, yet it boasts of great things. Behold, how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. And the tongue is like a fire, the very world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body and sets on fire the course of life and is set on fire by hell. In verse 7, it talks about, you know what? All the beasts of the world have been tamed by man. But listen to what it says in verse 8. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. See, there's nothing more evident to where our heart is than how our speech is influenced when we are being conformed to the world. For our words to be guided by a transformed tongue demands that we discipline ourselves for the purpose of godliness. To tame our tongue is a transformative work that only God can do. It's a work of Jesus Christ. And when the world conforms its tongue into the image of the world, when our blueprint of what we say looks like the world, then what we do is we inherit bad communication. We stuff, we shout, we interrupt, we argue. When Julie and I were first married, we lived in Kansas City. We didn't have two nickels to rub together. And we found a program in Kansas City. It was called home sharing, in which an older person or couple in the community would rent out part of their home, or they would just share part of their home with a younger couple. You would exchange services where you would help prepare meals, you would clean the house, you would take care of them some way. But it was a great way for us to get started. We didn't have two pennies to rub together. We thought this is a great way for us to start. And so we were teamed with a fellow by the name of Louis Kapnistos. He was 97 years old. He was Greek. He had come over to the States in 1905, I think it was. Can you imagine? 1905. His parents put him on a boat. He was a teenager, 16 years old, put him on a boat and said, hey, you're going to have a better life in the United States without us. Wow. So he comes over to the States. He graduated from Bethany College in Lindsborg, Kansas with a degree in accounts in 1911. He got married, had 5 kids, outlived 3 of his 5 kids. And so when we were teamed with him, he was 96 years of age, still sharp as a tack. He was Greek Orthodox and he loved my wife. And he would say, if I was God above and I could choose anyone to birth our blessed Lord Jesus, I would choose Mary or I would choose you, Julie. He thought Julie was a saint. He never could remember my name, so he would just call me the boy. But Julie and I were having one of those young married conversations. It was a fight. We didn't know how to communicate. We had one car at the time. I took the keys to the car. I threw them down on the bed. She snatched up the keys, and I thought my show of strength was really forceful. I was a shouter. She was a stuffer. She took the keys and she said, I'm going to take the car and I'm just going to drive out of here. And I said, oh, no, you're not. And she said, yes, I am. We went back and forth. No, you're not. Yes, I am. No, you're not. And yes, she did. She drove away. I was a shouter. She was a stuffer. We didn't know how to communicate. And as a result, we're tearing each other to pieces. And while she was gone for about 2 hours, I began to stew over why I was right and she was wrong. And I wanted to bully her into my way of thinking when she came back through the door, whenever that would be. And you remember what we said last week. John Gottman said, the way a conversation starts is the way it's going to finish. I didn't know that. And so I'm just ready to have it out with her. Why is it that when we get in an argument with somebody, whether it's a family member, whether it's a boss, whoever it is, that we think that when we are angry and we're lashing out, that somebody else is going to look at us and go, wow, you made a great point. Wow, you won the argument. That's never how it happens. And so what happened was we learned this whole idea that, you know what? We don't know how to argue. We don't know how to communicate. Now let me put that conversation on hold. Because the truth is, a lot of ways we respond to one another is because of family origin. What we witnessed, we have a tendency to duplicate. And that's not making anybody else out to be a criminal. We become like those we spend time with. See, here's our objective. The objective is to foster transparency. What we need to do when it comes to communication is we need to create a safe place to share who we are. I think in the Bible, in James chapter 1, verse 19, holds the key to create a safe place to share who you are. Let me read it to you. I'm reading from the New American Standard, James chapter 1, verse 19. It says this, "This you know, my beloved brethren, but let everyone be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." Job one, to create a safe place to share who we are starts, and this is in your notes, to listen carefully. Well, how do you listen carefully? Well, we've given you several bullets there, I think, to cause this to amplify. What do we mean when we say listen carefully? Well, I think it starts with giving focused attention. What if you thought of someone else's words that they're communicating to you as important as they are? Listen to Proverbs chapter 7, verse 24. By the way, Proverbs, like no other book, gives us so many helpful hints in how to live wisely with one another. And Proverbs 7:24 says, "Be attentive to the words of our mouth." Be attentive. Listen to what somebody's saying. Don't listen to how they're saying it. Because many times what happens is people are saying stuff with a lot of emotion. Don't react to their emotion. My dad used to say the best conversationalist is a good listener. So give focused attention. Second, avoid trying to fix a person. When you're listening to somebody, many times, especially us guys, what we do is we try to kick into fixing mode. Well, let me tell you this. You need to do this, you need to do this. You know what? When folks are sharing stuff with you, what they need is your shoulder more than your solution. Maybe not literally. Hey, no, come lay on my... No. It's, hey, let me listen to you. I want to hear you. Don't be so quick to give somebody a solution. Give them your shoulder first. The third thing here under listen carefully, feel the way the other person is feeling. Ask emotive questions. You know, man, that must have been hard. Tell me more about how that hurt you. That's an emotive question. And remember what we said last week. You don't have to feel the way somebody feels to validate them. You don't have to understand how somebody is feeling to validate them. You can still validate their feelings without you experiencing the same thing that they are feeling. Next, don't react. You know, the difference between reaction and not reacting is about 2 seconds. Is that what happens when we react, it's like those ball bearings. It's like, well, I react and then it causes an equal reaction. One reaction causes an equal reaction. So don't react, just listen. You don't have to get angry because someone else is angry. Just listen. Finally, summarize what you're hearing. When someone is voicing what they're wrestling with, just summarize maybe. Tell me more about what you're feeling right now. When you said this, tell me more about that. Are you telling me this? Of all that you said, what do you most want me to understand? See, those are summarizing statements. Listen to Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. A person's thoughts are like water in a deep well, but someone with insight can draw them out. See, that's what we're trying to do when we listen well. A person's thoughts are like water in a deep well, but someone with insight can draw them out. And that's what listening does. So if that's one side of the coin, if job one is to listen carefully, read James 1:19 again. It says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So if job one is listen carefully, the second application is to express yourself clearly. How do we do that? Well, think before you speak. Hey, heads up, beware outward processors. I'm an outward processor. About half of you are outward processors, where you just want to talk out your thoughts before maybe you've even processed them. That's your way of processing. Julie is an inward processor. She wants to process them in her mind before she communicates with them. You're an advantage. So think before you speak. Outward processors. How do you know if you're an outward processor? Well, here's a simple clue in. How do you look for your keys? Do you look for your keys with your mouth, or do you look for your keys with your eyes? See, the outward processor will go, hey, where's my keys? Where'd you put my keys? The inward processor will observe with their eyes. And what happens is we're an outward processor. Many times we can speak before we think. You know, I think I'm going to send little Jimmy to military school. What? You know, your spouse who's an inward processor just thinks, oh my gosh, you've already signed the paperwork. No, you're just the outward processing. So think before you speak. Listen to Proverbs chapter 21, verse 23. It says, he who guards his mouth and his tongue, listen to this, guards his soul from trouble. Think before you speak. And again, the difference between thinking before you speak and just blurting it out is about 2 seconds. The second bullet there, a good suggestion, is ask, when's a good time that we talk? Because what you want to do is you want to create a conducive environment for communication. Hey, best time to have a good conversation is on a full stomach. It really is. You're rested, you're settled, you're contemplative. Guys, don't have this conversation when there's ears around that don't need to hear it. If you're parents and you need to discuss something serious, don't do it in front of the kids. You might say to them, hey, mom and dad need to have this conversation, and so we need some time by ourselves. You be that. It's just that simple. Ladies, you need to understand something. The 3 dreaded words in man's language is late at night when a man is very tired. These are the 3 dreaded words in the male language. Can we talk? Oh my gosh. That's why it's good to say, hey, you know what's a good time that we can sit down and we can discuss this? Well, third bullet here is share your heart. What's your heart? Well, your heart is your pains, your fears, your hopes, your desires. Because remember, transparency is what we are after. Listen to Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. And again, Proverbs are so wonderful. It says, the one who speaks rashly is like the thrusts of a sword. The one who speaks rashly is like the thrusts of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. See, what I hear in that is when we conform ourselves to what the world's blueprint is for how to communicate, what we do is we thrust our words. You always, you never. Oh, I knew what your motives were. Oh, you are a, and then we start calling names. Those are thrusts of pain. Or we can use our tongue to bring healing. Wow. Hey, by the way, just a beware. Your anger sabotages someone else's vulnerability. There in your notes it says anger sabotages vulnerability. But let me be very clear. Your anger will sabotage someone else's vulnerability. Because if you react in anger, well, somebody doesn't want to talk to you. It's like last week we talked about that cortisol. When that chemical, that fight or flight syndrome kicks in, it's that self-defense hormone that kicks in. And all of a sudden when that kicks in, you need to put yourself in timeout and go, wait, well, nothing good is going to come out of me right now. All I'm going to do is I'm going to sabotage your vulnerability because I'm just going to spew anger. When you feel that cortisol coming over you and you are angry and you are in a spew mode, put yourself in timeout. Say, hey, you know what? I need to take a walk. I need to separate myself because I'm not in a good place right now. I can remember when Julie and I were first married, we had this little teeny 2-bedroom house, and it was in Dallas, and we had a dishwasher that it wasn't built in. It was one of those, it had a big butcher block top that you would wheel over to the sink, and you would take some plumbing from the back and you would just tap it into the sink. Some of you remember what those were like. And so we had the dishwasher loaded, and Julie and I were having an argument, and I hit my fist on top of that butcher block top. Again, I'm in the spewing, shouting mode. I didn't hit her. I have never hit her. But you know what? That anger, this is what her body language was. When I hit the top of that butcher block top, this was what her body language was. She stepped back and instantly closed her arms like this. What I did is I closed her spirit. She didn't want to talk to me. She certainly didn't want to touch me. See, my anger sabotaged her vulnerability. Finally, this bullet, it says, pay attention to your body language. Pay attention to your body language. A friend of mine, Tim Downs, has done extensive research on body language and communication. And he talked with an FBI agent. And, you know, normally we think eyes and face, window to your soul, which is true. But you know what an FBI agent looks at? He looks more at body language. If you were to come into this room and you were to start talking to me and my legs and my torso were facing this way, and I never turned towards you, you know what my legs, my feet, my torso are communicating? I don't want to talk to you. And so observe your body language. When someone who has hurt you comes to you, your natural response is your body language wants to shift away from them. And it's revealed in your feet and your legs and your torso. That's why when you are communicating, give your whole self, your feet, your legs, your torso, to be able to communicate clearly, to say, hey, I am open to you. Well, you remember situation. Julie walked out of the house. Louis Capnistos' place, threw down the keys, she took them, and I was going to have it out with her. And I was going to come on strong when she walked through the door and begin to go through my litany of why I was right and she was wrong. I didn't know how to communicate. 2.5 hours later, she comes through the door. And I was ready to have it out. fists clenched. I was locked and loaded with my argument. I noticed she had a gift-wrapped package under her arm. What's under your arm? She pulls it out. Oh, it's a present. I went out and bought a gift. I said, well, who's it for? She said, it's for you. I bought you a gift. I hope you like it. You ever been there? See, I remember last week we shared 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 9, and again, let me read it to you. It says, don't return evil for evil or insult for insult. What I wanted to do is I wanted to insult her. And yet what she did is she gave a blessing instead. She destroyed my malice. I was looking for a good fight. She destroyed my malice with her kindness. And you know what? Kindness destroys malice 10 times out of 10. Kindness destroys insults 10 times out of 10. I don't know what that fight was about, but at that point in time, I was melted into the turf and go, wow, you know what? I'm sorry. I was wrong. And then I tried to practice what we talked about last week in terms of going, man, would you forgive me? I was wrong. I need a do-over. See, but it never would have got to that point had we known how to communicate. But we've got to learn not to return insults for insults, but blessings in place of an insult. That's your greatest challenge right now during this time where you're all locked in your homes. It's so easy to return insult for insult, sarcasm for sarcasm. Somebody's got to stop it. And parents, you need to be the ones to lead the charge and go, no, I'm not. I love you. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I still love you. Let me change gears. Easter week is upon us, and we're disappointed that we can't meet together. It is disappointing. The greatest date on the Christian calendar, and we can't be together. But that is not going to stop us from celebrating the greatest event in human history, that Jesus conquered death. And so here's our mindset as we go into this week, is that if death didn't keep Jesus in the grave, then you know what? A quarantine is not going to keep us from celebrating. I've kind of created a modern day parable. Maybe that's maybe a little too strong of language, but this is what I was thinking about this past week. You remember the movie? Of course you do, The Grinch That Stole Christmas. And you remember all the people in Whoville, and they're nestled into their beds, and the Grinch comes in and he steals all of the visual aids of Christmas. The trees, the gifts, the ribbons, the lights, the bows. And as he's observing the scene, when all those in Whoville get up the next morning and they start celebrating Christmas. And what broke into his calloused heart was the citizens of Whoville celebrated still. They didn't need all the other accoutrements because the day was bigger than all of those things. For sure, the virus that has struck is a Grinch. But what will break into the world's calloused heart is that we will celebrate still. And we are. We're going to celebrate this week. In our sniblets, we're going to prepare for his coming, for his resurrection. And on Friday, we're going to prepare. We're going to have a Good Friday celebration. And on Sunday morning, we're going to celebrate the greatest event in human history. And so this week, as you move into this week, as you come in contact with your neighbors, as you interact as your families, this is the thought that I want to permeate everything we do. If death couldn't hold Jesus in the grave, then a quarantine is not going to keep us from celebrating. Let me pray for us. Lord, thank you that you are alive, that you are real, that you are good, you are true. And that in the midst of our culture bringing about this idea of, oh no, death is upon us. Well, the reality is death has always been near. And the message that we have is a life changer. That you, Jesus, have conquered death on the cross and provided a way for us to do the same. And people need to know that. And people need to know that we aren't daunted by the fact that we, as your followers, well, we can't be together. Sad, yes. But the reality is the joy of you conquering death trumps all of that. And so that's what we cling to. We cling to an empty tomb and your goodness to us. And so we celebrate that. It is in Jesus' matchless holy name. And all God's people said, amen. Thank you for letting us come into your home. We'll see you this week through our sniblets and look forward to worshiping with you next weekend. Have a great week.